When I made my flight plans 2 months ago, I was supposed to leave at 8 o'clock. And then I get this notice saying that it was going to be at 6 o'clock instead. So it was a little disturbing, and there wasn't much I can do about that. But I'm so happy to have been here with you just for this short time. It's been such a wonderful experience for me. I'm beginning to question the wisdom of teaching meditation after lunch. I stopped teaching after lunch. I teach all my classes in the morning, but I stopped teaching because my students tended to doze off, and when we do meditation, that's almost an added incentive to do that. So do your best and stay awake. I'll try to make it as interesting as I can, but we will actually experience some meditation. But before I do, I want to say a few words about meditation, about mindfulness, to kind of put it all in the Buddhist context. So we hear a lot about meditation these days, of course. You know, Time magazine every 10 years runs a cover story. One is on meditation. I think this was done, I can't even see the date on it, about 12 years ago or something. About 2 years ago, they did something called the Mindful Revolution. And you begin to think after you see these covers that if you meditate, you're going to turn into a scantily clad white female. And if you Google meditation or mindfulness, this is pretty much what comes up, you know. So maybe for some of you, this would be an incentive to practice meditation. So it's a very interesting phenomenon. When I think of meditation, though, I like this guy. It tends to be the truer face of meditation, because meditation is a very difficult practice, and sometimes it seems like I'm nearing death as I do this sort of thing. And that really is the hardest thing about meditation. It's to sit down. The first minute of meditation is the hardest moment of meditation. Just getting the gumption to sit down and practice it. It's so hard to do. But once you get into it, you begin to think, why aren't I doing this all the time? It's such a wonderful experience. But like so many good things in life, we don't always do them. We're going to begin by talking about mindfulness. And as you saw on those covers from Time, mindfulness and meditation are often used interchangeably. And I want to distinguish between the two, particularly in the Buddhist context, because they are not the same thing. We do have what we call mindfulness meditation, and that's what the Buddha taught. It's one form of meditation out of literally hundreds of different forms, and we're going to focus on that. But before we get into it, I think it's helpful for us to talk about what mindfulness is. Now, at the last lecture, I got to that slide and had the cat looking at the insect and was going to talk about what's called right mindfulness. And so you'll remember it's a component of the Eightfold Noble Path. So it is very much an important part towards seeking nibbana, but it's not the only part, but it's an extremely important part. And I think it has a very important role to play in our highly stressed society today. So even if you don't buy anything else of Buddhist theology or ideas, I think meditation is something that you might want to consider. In fact, as I was saying earlier, you'll find practices similar to mindfulness meditation in virtually all traditions. Even the Christian tradition and Judaism, Islam, they all have something like this. In the book that many of you have, Four Wise Men, I say this is one of the things that these four sages had in common. They all took time to be quiet. It's as simple as that. Now, they might have done different things. Muhammad liked to pray, as Jesus did. The Buddha just sat quietly and watched his breath. Confucius thought about his moral life. But they all made time in their days to sit alone and be still. And I think that's such a very important thing. And it's all about mindfulness. That's what all these things are. So in order to get to mindfulness, I like to think mainly about its opposite, which I call mindlessness, because that's where we are most of the time. And I think we're probably more familiar with our mindlessness than we are with mindfulness. That's why I call it the default state. When we're not being mindful, we usually revert back to mindlessness. You might think of it as autopilot, just sort of living your life in its ordinary routine, doing things day after day, until one day you wake up and wondering, where have I spent the last 20 years of my life? You know, that's mindlessness. Okay? Mindlessness does not mean a lack of thought. That's what you might think. It doesn't mean that you're lacking thought. It means you're lacking awareness. You're lacking a focus. You're lacking discipline. You're letting your mind distract you and go every which way. That's what happens so often. And you'll notice that there are icons for Facebook and Twitter and YouTube because these things distract us, and they're part of today what contributes to our sense of mindlessness. The reason we're mindless is because our minds love novelty. And this has been part of our evolutionary advantage as human beings. We love to try things out. We're curious creatures. We like to create things. We become very hungry for ideas and thoughts and knowledge. The mind, consequently, is constantly at work. And sometimes that gets out of control. Our minds are like workaholics. They hardly ever stop. If you look very carefully at this image, it's a cover of a magazine, a New Yorker magazine from 1969, a great little drawing by Saul Steinberg. And he's looking at a modern art painting. You can't see the words that's going through his mind, and I can't either, so I'm going to get a little closer to it. It says Baroque. Brock being the painter of this particular modern art piece. And then he goes from Baroque to Barrack, to Bark, to Poodle, to Suzanne R., 68th Street, Regent 7, Butterfield 8, Algonquin 4, El Dorado 5, on and on and on. It's a train of thought. Now, I don't know about you, this represents my mind very well. I'll just look at something, and the next thing I know, I'm thinking about something else. And 10 minutes later, I'm wondering, how did I get here? What was that train of thought? That's just the way my mind works because it's constantly churning. The other thing is, it's constantly churning rubbish. I mean, when you look at it, we have great thoughts sometimes, not always. For me, 95% of my thoughts just belongs in the garbage heap. Basically, it's random stuff, it's random images, it's what really drives me crazy are all the judgments that I have about people and ideas and things like that. It's just constantly going. So I sometimes have a good thought, but most of the time it's just not that way. And when I am thinking, I like to dwell in the past or I like to dwell in the future. One of my favorite things is making lists about the things that I need to do. Just like right now, we're thinking about getting me to the airport, living in the future. And I'm constantly making lists. I even do that while I meditate sometimes. I'm sitting there making lists in my mind, or I'm dwelling on the past. The problem with that is that that's the source of a lot of our suffering. When we think about the past, we think a lot about the things that we regret, the things that we didn't do, or the things we did that we shouldn't have done, or a conversation we had with a spouse or a friend that didn't go well, and we're rehearsing it over and over again, saying, boy, I wish I had that over to do again. That's the past. It's the source of a lot of sorrow for us. And the future is the source of a lot of our fear. Mark Twain once said, there have been so many terrible things that have happened to me, and most of them never occurred. And what he meant was that, he thinks about the worst things that could happen, and for the most part, they don't turn out. But that's what happens when we dwell in the future in this way. As I said, we spend a lot of time judging. I'm constantly judging. It just drives me crazy. The silliest things come into my mind about what people are wearing or what they're saying or the kind of car they're driving, this kinds of stuff. It just is such a distraction, but that's constantly going on. And as a result, we don't know our minds very well. We can have an experience just like this, where some guy's thinking, my life could end at any moment. What a profound, sublime thought. Then I wonder what's on TV tonight. It's just like that, from the sublime to the ridiculous. That's the way my mind works. And I don't always understand why it does that. It sometimes seems that my mind is in control of me. Having grown up in Waco and attended the Heart of Texas Fair and Rodeo every year of my young life, the image of a cowboy on a bull has been seared into my imagination, and it came up when I began thinking about what it's like in relationship to my mind. My mind is like a bull. It is extremely powerful, and it goes from one thing to the other. You've probably heard the expression monkey mind. I've got a bullish mind. It's just bronking up and down, and I'm trying to hold on for dear life, it seems, sometimes. So it doesn't seem to me like I'm in control of my mind, but my mind is in control of me. And this, by the way, is an interesting point within Buddhism. Buddhism does not think of the mind as the center of our personality, because there is no center, right? There's no self, as we talked about. But the mind is an organ. This is how Buddhism and, to some extent, Hinduism think about the mind. It's our sixth sense. So we have eyes, we have ears, we have noses that sense these various things. The mind senses thoughts according to this way of understanding. So it's not who we are, though, particularly in my field, academia, we try to encourage that, for people to think this is the center of our personality. Our thinking is who we are. It affects who we are, but it's not really who we are. And the problem with mindlessness, of course, is it leads to suffering, to dukkha. Okay, and this image is of someone who is totally distracted. They're not focused, they're not mindful, and the suffering that's about to happen is this poor young man is going to be run over by a car, and no telling what kind of havoc that's going to wreak. So that's what it's like. I actually see people in Memphis driving around like this. So that's the problem with mindlessness, is that it leads to this suffering. And of course, as I said earlier, the antidote to mindlessness, is mindfulness. And what I mean by mindfulness is very simple. It's moment-to-moment awareness. It's just being aware of what's happening as it's happening. And this happens to us sometimes spontaneously, without us even trying to encourage it. It just occurs. So we're all familiar with what mindfulness is, but that's not the way we usually live our lives. I also define mindfulness as relaxed attention, and this is one of my favorite ways of thinking about it. Relaxed attention. We're attentive, but we're relaxed. And what's important about this is that usually when we're attentive, we're not relaxed. When I think of attention, I think of soldiers standing at attention. They're attentive, to be sure, but they don't look terribly relaxed to me. On the other hand, when we're relaxed, we're not usually attentive. Those two things don't always go hand in hand. So meditation and mindfulness help to inculcate this quality of being relaxed and being mindful or aware at the same time. I believe mindfulness is a natural quality. I think it's something that we all have, and it's just something that we need to develop, to cultivate. It's there, it's within us, but it's not something that we encourage in our own development. It's not anything that we ordinarily teach in school, though I think it is perhaps one of the most important things we could teach in school. But when we do that, we're just drawing upon a natural ability. And I liken it to the way that we all have certain kinds of physical qualities, right? We have a certain amount of strength or endurance or flexibility. These are physical kinds of qualities, but if we want to enhance them, we have to refine them. And so people go to the gym to do this, and they work out to develop these qualities of strength, endurance, and flexibility. And it's the same thing with mindfulness. It's there, it's natural, but it needs to be worked on and developed. And meditation is one way to do this. It's one way to refine the mindfulness that's already there. There are other ways you could do it. In fact, you could do mindfulness doing virtually anything. Doing yoga or just sitting still or any number of things that we could talk about. But meditation is one way that has been discovered by human beings about 5,000 years ago, and something that's being practiced in virtually all the religious and many of the philosophical traditions as a way of enhancing our sense of awareness. So that takes us to meditation. What is meditation, and how does it differ from mindfulness? Because, as I said, they're not the same thing. Meditation is a practice. Meditation is a discipline. If we think of mindfulness as this quality that we go to the gym to develop, meditation is like going to the gym. It's like exercising this quality that we have, this sense of awareness and focus and concentration and relaxation. So it's there to help us enhance what is there within us ordinarily. Interestingly, in Buddhism, Hinduism, all the Eastern traditions, there's no word for meditation. Meditation is a Western word. And in fact, it's a little misleading, and I kind of wish we didn't use that word in the West, because when we think of meditation, we often associate it with cogitation or rumination, thinking over something over and over again. So it's like in the Christian tradition, you got the Lectio Divina, where you just think about a passage of the Bible over and over again. Now, that's not meditation in the Buddhist sense. The term that's used in Buddhism for meditation is bhavana, which means cultivation, and it's an agricultural term. It's really what you do when you plant seedlings of rice and you grow it and you cultivate it and you produce a crop. And I think it's a very rich metaphor, because that is exactly how I see meditation. It is cultivating the mind. It is planting seeds and nourishing them and watering them and taking care of the weeds so that it produces an abundant, nourishing crop of thoughts that leads to a more wholesome, happy life. That's why I like this idea of meditation as cultivation. It's also a skill. That's important to know. It's something that has to be practiced, something that has to be learned, and the more you do it, the easier it becomes. So, of course, as you begin playing the violin or the piano, it's pretty difficult. It seems kind of wooden, artificial. You kind of even hate it for a while, but then you get into the rhythm. Then you develop this process. Then the skill takes over, and you don't have to think so much about it. That's what meditation is like. It's this kind of skill. It's nothing exotic. You don't have to wear strange clothes. You don't have to put on an orange robe. You don't have to shave your head. You don't have to take on a Tibetan name. You don't have to do anything. You don't have to go to India to learn to practice it, though that's what I did. But it's very non-exotic. It's very ordinary. It's very commonplace, very familiar. So you don't have to go to all these trappings that a lot of people are interested in meditation in the Western tradition. It's not about having particular experiences. Okay, so if you think, oh, I'm going to meditate and I'm going to feel one with God, or I'm going to feel bliss, or I'm going to feel serenity, or any of these kinds of expectations, if that's what you think meditation is, you got to give that up. Because that's an expectation. And one of the things that we know about expectations is they lead to disappointment. Okay, remember, that's dukkha, that's suffering. When you create expectations about what meditation is, you're going to think you're not meditating properly if it doesn't happen that way. So I always encourage my meditation students to let go of whatever conceptions that they might have about what meditation is, about what it's going to do for them, about whether or not it's going to make them happy or serene or any of these sorts of things. Just let that go, because these are expectations that get in the way and obscure the process itself. Of course, meditation's not easy. I showed you an image like this from the Buddha's own awakening experience where Mara comes. And Mara, you don't have to think of Mara as being this external Satan figure in Buddhism. You can think of Mara as being part of your own mind, which is really what it is. It's just those things in your mind that's going to try to keep you from doing the things you know you need to do. It's going to try to sabotage your happiness. It's going to try to cause you to stay attached to certain things. And that's what makes meditation very difficult. And when I teach meditation, many of my students, they're so happy about this because I put it in the syllabus. We're going to learn meditation on this day. And you're going to come to the chapel and we're going to teach you this. And they're so excited. Oh, right. We don't have to go to class. Don't have to take notes. Don't have to listen to this guy lecture. And we're just going to sit there and I'm going to feel happy. And they go in, and when it's over, they're so disappointed because it's not what they expected. It's really hard work. When's the last time that you known a college student who sat still for 30 minutes. They don't do it too well. All right, it drives them crazy. All these things that we have suppressed and tried not to think about start coming up. And that is Mara. That's why it is difficult. Mindfulness also is not a practice for wellness or stress reduction or self-improvement. And this is something that a lot of people find a little strange, because this is one of the selling points of mindfulness meditation in the United States. This is why Time puts these covers up, of these very happy people who look so good and healthy, because they think that mindfulness practice does this. Well, it might, but it might not, because you might not be relaxed with meditation. You may have thoughts that are very troubling as a consequence of it. You might not feel stress reduction, at least initially. Okay? And this is the thing that you have to know, is that it can be tough at first, but over time it begins to change. It begins to change with practice. As long as you practice it, even when you don't feel like practicing, the more you do it, the easier it becomes, and the more these experiences of relaxation and good health, stress reduction, they all begin to take effect. But it takes time. And so I liken it to the Dow Jones averages. So if you invest in the stock market, that the market has its ups and downs on any given day. But over time, it grows upwards. So despite the fact that you've lost, 500 points in your stocks today, doesn't mean it's going to stay that way. This is an impermanent reality. Those stocks are going to go back up. But over time, you can kind of count on the market as improving in this way. And that's the way it is with meditation. So you might have a bad day of meditation, but the more you do it, the better it becomes. It's not dependent on beliefs. I've emphasized this over and over again. The Buddha never made any particular belief a condition of practicing this path. You don't have to believe in God, but if you do believe in God, that's fine. It doesn't really matter. So it's not dependent on these beliefs. It's not about controlling our thoughts, as a lot of people think, but really what it's about is keeping our thoughts from controlling us, really establishing a new relationship with that bull that we're sitting on. That's what it's about. Mindfulness teaches us to observe our minds and to do it without judgment and evaluation. And this is the really good point of meditation as I look at it. Being a very judging person, and usually those judgments are directed more towards myself than anyone else. To be able to look at myself dispassionately without what I call comparing mind, without sort of making judgments about who I am, without thinking I'm a good person or a bad person, without any of that sort of stuff. That's what you're going for in the mindfulness practice. So, to sum it up, mindfulness is a quality of attention or awareness. It's a quality. And meditation is a discipline that cultivates that quality. That's the distinction between them. Okay? Simple as that. There are benefits from this, of course, and I should mention them to you. You're probably aware of them: physical wellness, mental acuity, emotional freedom, spiritual depth, social harmony. There's been done so much research in the last dozen years on the great benefits of meditation, and almost every scientific study says this is about one of the best things you can do for yourself. It's a lot like exercise was back in the 60s. Back in the 60s, not everybody ran or jogged, and if you did, you were seen as being kind of exotic. But now, it's kind of part of the mainstream to take a run. And I think that's going to happen with meditation too. We're now beginning to see that this is truly a beneficial thing for our life on all kinds of levels. All meditation practices have a few things in common. There are hundreds of different kinds of meditation. Maybe you're familiar with some of them. Even in Buddhism, there are lots of different kinds. But they all have certain elements that I want to mention to you. One is stillness. Basically, in a meditation practice, at least as you're beginning that practice, you want to be still. You want your body to come to a center point, to not make movement. Now, I also hasten to add that there are meditation practices you can do as you move. So you can do walking meditation, running meditation. I got a driving meditation that I do, swimming meditation, anything. But stillness is an important thing because as you're learning the practice, stilling the body helps to calm the mind. Okay, so stillness is one factor you'll find in almost all meditation. Posture is another one. Many people make a big deal out of posture. In the Zen tradition, it's very important. Others say it's not important at all. So there's even disagreement within the Buddhist tradition about that. But I think posture is important because it helps you to stay in a position for a long period of time. And every time I see this picture, I'm always worried that this monk is going to fall over backwards. It does not seem to be a great place to do his meditation, especially when you're trying to seek stability with your body. But that's posture. Space and time is important. I noticed there's a meditation room over here. I don't know if any of you have seen that. I was really pleased to have that. We've got one at my college. Just having a space where you can go to sit and be quiet is so important. And if you got that place at your house, that's wonderful. If you can dedicate a room or a closet to it, that's great because you go there and you're already primed for meditation just by going into that sacred space to do that. Concentration is another aspect. Now, concentration means the ability to focus on one thing, and almost all forms of meditation at least start with concentration. The Hindus call it one-pointedness, just the ability to focus your attention on one single thing. Because, as I was saying, the mind gets so distracted, and when it gets distracted, it'll just go anywhere. It's the monkey mind. So you have to be able to learn to focus it. And all kinds of things can be taken as what are known as anchors of our awareness. The breath is the one that the Buddha himself particularly practiced. So you focus on your breathing. That's what I'm going to teach you in a moment. You can look at a candle or an image. This is popular in Tibetan Buddhism, where they have an image of the Buddha or some other bodhisattva. And you look at that and try to visualize that image within yourself or look at it externally. There are mantras. Mantra is just a word for a syllable or a phrase that you repeat over and over again. So we were talking at lunch about Om as being one of these mantras. A lot of Hindus repeat Om over and over again. In Christianity, there's something known as the Jesus prayer in the Orthodox tradition, where you say, Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy upon me, a sinner. And you repeat this over and over again. If you've never read the book called The Way of the Pilgrim, I highly recommend it. It's all about reciting that Jesus prayer and the great changes that overcame this individual in 19th century Russia as a consequence of it. So that's a mantra. Another thing is you can just focus on a sensation of any kind, the feeling of anything on your body, itches, whatever it might be. You can focus your attention there. Okay, so anything can become the object of attention. And then once you've done that, once you've kind of brought the mind to a certain still point, you can begin to watch it. And that's part of what you're doing. You're watching the mind. You're becoming the observer of the mind. Instead of identifying with the mind and just being caught up in it, you start watching the mind. And you become an observer of yourself. And I like the image of sort of clouds moving across a blue sky. If you think of the thoughts that you have or the sensations that you have as these clouds, they just float across the sky. And you don't have to latch onto them. You don't have to grab one. You don't have to entertain them. You just allow these thoughts to arise and to fall because they naturally will. Or you can think of them as little sailboats going across the water. And as this happens, what you begin to experience is that your mind begins to settle down. So just like mud in a jar of water. We're constantly stirring up our minds. We're stimulating it. We're constantly thinking, and that's what keeps it muddy. But when we stop and become focused and just allow this to still, all that muddy water just kind of settles down and it becomes clear. Okay? And that's the object of Vipassana meditation, the kind of meditation that the Buddha taught. Clarity of mind. Once you see clearly, then you can see the world as it is. You can see the dynamics of the world itself. William James, one of my great heroes, said the faculty of voluntarily bringing back A wandering attention over and over again is the very root of judgment, character, and will. An education which should improve this faculty would be the education par excellence. Unfortunately, American education has not taken James seriously on this, and I'm hoping that's going to change as we begin to teach these sorts of practices. I teach them in my classes. I begin every class with a short meditation because I think it's really so important, and students can understand and learn better when they're attentive in this way. And when you practice over time, though you may have, down days, over time your mind allows you to see it more clearly so that you have greater understanding. You become calmer, quieter, more serene. You get focused. You have the capacity to respond rather than react. And what I mean by this is that for the most part, when we're not being attentive to ourselves, we don't respond to emotions in perhaps the most wholesome way. So if someone says something insulting to us, our tendency is, our reflex is just to insult them back or punch them out or whatever it might be, but something to kind of exacerbate the situation. What meditation does, by allowing you to observe yourself, is to create this moment in our experience where if someone angers you, you have some amount of time where you say to yourself, that made me mad. I'm angry. And then you say, how is the best way to respond? You have that little bit of moment. That's what mindfulness does, is to give you this space in which to react or to respond really in a more wholesome way rather than to simply do a knee-jerk reaction to whatever it is that they have. And that contributes to what I call equanimity. Equanimity is just, as the name seems to imply, having kind of an equal balance so that you're not conditioned by the bad things or the good things that happen to you. You just have this kind of calm presence. That's the goal. I'm going to conclude with this statement by Franz Kafka, another one. He says, it isn't necessary that you leave home. Sit at your desk and listen. Don't even listen. Just wait. Don't wait. Be still and alone. The whole world will offer itself to you. And even though I teach meditation and have been doing so for about 30 years, I'm getting to where I think meditation is just simply a matter of three little things. Sit down, be quiet, and pay attention. That's all it is. I mean, it's just kind of like that sort of thing that you get in kindergarten. You just sit down, be quiet, and pay attention. There's no fancy techniques that are involved. Even the desert fathers and mothers used to say, all you need to do is to go into your room and be quiet, and your room will teach you everything you need to know. And so increasingly, I teach less and less about techniques for meditation, though there are plenty of them. But simply taking the discipline to be quiet, to be still, to sit down, and to listen. That really is all that we need to do if we'll take the time to do it. So that's what we're going to do. Are you all still with me? Anybody asleep yet? Okay, all right. Now I'm wondering, Bill, if we might ought to turn on the lights. Would that be okay? I was once teaching meditation to a group of psychologists. And we were going through this practice, and it was right after lunch. And I went through this, guided meditation and everything. And the guy on my left started snoring. And everybody, around the table, they couldn't meditate because this guy, he was real. It was awful like this. And it just went on and on. Of course, I didn't do anything. Then I just kind of ended the meditation, and I said, okay, how was that? Did anybody have any trouble paying attention? The guy who was snoring said, nope, not me. I've been asleep the whole time. But if people snore, that's okay too. That's just part of it. Part of meditation is just accepting what is. accepting our experience as it is. And if you're tired, you're tired. If you need to sleep, go to sleep. It's as simple as that. One thing you will learn if you ever get into a discipline of meditation, that over time you need less and less sleep. So I was once on a 14-day meditation retreat where we were meditating, I think about 14 hours a day for 14 days. That sound bad? Okay. Well, it was one of the most extraordinary experiences of my life. It's great. I highly recommend it. But after about a week, I didn't really need to sleep. I slept maybe 2 hours, but that was all I needed. So I know folks that they don't really sleep much at all simply because they're able to gain what they would have gained sleeping by meditating. Yeah. One of the big things in Buddhism, and I don't know if I'll be able to do it in this lifetime, but it's a 3-year, 3-month, 3-week, 3-day, 3-hour meditation. So you just do it for that entire 3 years plus. Yeah. So when it's over, I guess you come out feeling pretty good. So I would hope. So I assume many of you have practiced meditation before, and so much of this will probably seem very familiar to you. I'm just going to do kind of a guided meditation, walk us through it in case you have not done it before. If you don't want to listen to me and you prefer to meditate in a different way, please feel free to do that. But I'm going to sort of walk you through a meditation similar to the one that the Buddha taught. He called it meditation with breathing. It's a focus on the breath. And just follow along with me, do what I say, and we'll take some time and then we'll have a little discussion afterwards to see how it was. Let's see here. I want to tell you, you can meditate with your eyes open or your eyes closed. And there are advantages to doing both. If you close your eyes, there are going to be less distractions, not so much visual stimuli. On the other hand, you're more prone to go to sleep. And if you sort of just kind of keep your eyes open and sort of focus on a spot towards the ground or something, you're going to stay awake a lot better, but then there are going to be, all these other things that might happen as a consequence. So for me, I start hallucinating with my eyes open. So anything can happen. Anything can happen in meditation. Okay, you might meet God. You might become one with the universe. You might feel your soul rising out of your body. And that's okay. Anything that happens just has to be accepted for what it is. Okay? And we just try to develop that sense of acceptance, of openness to our experience. That's basically what it is. Now, I'm just going to teach you some foundational things. This is just the beginning stuff. There's a lot of things that go on beyond this. But the first thing that we have to learn is concentration. And the way we do it is concentrating on our breath, and I'll talk you through that. And then I'm also going to talk you through the observing of the mind. And these are two aspects of meditation. One's called focused attention, and the other is called open monitoring. And you go back and forth in this practice. So, as I said, posture is important, so I want you to sit in a comfortable position. These chairs, I sat in them earlier, are not the best for meditation. They kind of lean back a little bit. So if you want to sit on the floor, that's perfectly fine. Come up here with me on the stage. Or you might find this helpful, and that is to sit on the edge of your chair like this. Okay, now believe it or not, you can sit like this longer than you can if you lean back. Your back gets tired when you're leaning back this way, and you have to adjust. If you do this, and it might take some practice to do it this way, develop muscles you're not always using, but doing this actually helps you stay in this position for a longer time. And the goal simply is to help relax and help you stay in a stable position so that you're not squiggling, wiggling around or feeling, like you've got to move. But if you have to move, it's okay. We're not rigid about this, though there are places. If you go to a Zen monastery and you move, they're going to whack you with a stick. So Zen's tough. It's tough. I'm not that tough. I'm not going to whack you with a stick. So get in that position if you can. If you can put your feet flat on the ground, that will be helpful. Try to find a stable position. Now go ahead and close your eyes if you want to do that, or keep them open if you do. If you keep your eyes open, try to look at a space about 6 feet ahead of you, so that your eyes are kind of lowered. You may recognize in some of the icons of the Buddha that his eyelids are half closed and half opened, and that's because that's the way he's meditating, with open eyes. But it also means that he's in the world but not of the world. It has a kind of theological significance to it. So, with your eyes either opened or closed, your feet flat on the floor, try to elongate your spine. Imagine a thread or a twine that's connected to the top of your skull, and it's also connected to the ceiling, and it's being gently pulled upward. And so as your skull is pulled upward, your spine elongates, and you might feel a curvature in the small of your back. That's natural, so that you're trying to gain a very comfortable position with your back. And then draw your attention to your hands and allow them to rest on your lap. Now you can put them on your knees, or you can put them one hand in the other and sort of rest them, and have one thumb touching the other thumb. Whatever's most comfortable. There's no rigid rule about that. Just keep your arms in a place where they feel relaxed. And then allow your attention to move upwards to your shoulders. And here allow your shoulders to kind of move downward, to relax downward. If you feel tension in the upper part of your back, as a lot of people do, just try to let that relax. And let the sense of relaxation travel down your arms from your shoulders to your hands, so that they're just lightly resting on your lap. Try to keep your head upright, and just keep imagining that skull being pulled upwards. And draw your attention to your face. And try to sense if there's any tension in the muscles of your face. And if you feel some, try to relax that. Just let it go. The same with the muscles in your jaw. Just let your jaw hang lightly. You can keep your lips closed or slightly opened, it doesn't matter. Just kind of scan the various areas of your face, the forehead, your cheeks. Any place you might feel tension, just allow that to relax. And now we're going to begin to attend to our breathing. This is going to be our anchor for concentration. We're going to try to find the place in our body where the sensation of breathing is most prominent. It'll be different for different people. It may be different for you at different times. Some feel it most prominently as the abdomen moves in and out just below the diaphragm. Some find the rise and fall of the chest to be the place where it's most prominent. Others like to focus on the sensation of the air moving through the nostrils. Just take a moment. Find the place where you feel the breath most dominant. And then let your attention stay there. Try to keep your mind focused on this sensation of breathing. Whether it's the abdomen, the chest, the nostrils, even if you're breathing through your mouth. Just watch the breath. There's no need to focus or force your breath. Let it be what it is. You don't need to take deep breaths or shallow breaths, but do notice what they are. When you begin to attend to your breathing, they become extremely fascinating. Each breath is different. Some are shallow, some are long and deep. I'm going to take a few moments and I'll be quiet, and I want you to focus your attention there on the experience of breathing. It's such a privilege to breathe, something we take for granted. But more than anything, it means we're alive. If you need to adjust your position or scratch an itch, that's just fine. Just do so mindfully. Just be aware of what's going on. Be aware of the sensation and the intention. Now, if you've been attending to your breath, you probably noticed that your mind begins to wander, and that staying focused on your breathing and its sensations, not an easy thing to do. You may be thinking about what you're planning to do this afternoon or tonight, what you did earlier in the week. Your mind may be somewhere else. That happens, and it's normal. But what we want to do is to become aware of that. Our purpose is to observe the mind when it wanders. When we have a thought or a sensation, simply note that. You can actually just sort of softly say to yourself, thinking, itching, anger, whatever it might be, you can label it or not, but just to be aware of the fact that this experience has arisen. And then when you become aware of it, gently escort your attention back to your breath, so that now you're observing your breathing once again. And it won't be long before you're distracted by something else. And so just stay attentive to that. And each time, as you become aware of your straying mind, bring your attention back to your anchor. And we're going to continue this for a few moments. And I'm going to stay silent. And you stay with your breath and observe your mind. See what's happening. Try not to resist any part of your experience. If it's an unpleasant thought, just relinquish it. Try not to dwell on it. Let the thoughts and sensations come and go. Because like everything else in the world, they're impermanent. If your mind has wandered, gently escort it back to your breath. With each out breath, allow your body to deepen its relaxation. In just a moment, we're going to conclude this meditation. And as we prepare to do that, bring your hands together and gently touch them, rub them a bit. And when you feel ready, if your eyes have been closed, you can open those. And now the meditation is concluded. You can sit back in your chairs if you like. I forgot my little dinger that I have to start this. So, how was the experience? It was relaxing. Good. Anybody find it not relaxing? Less sleepy? Well, that's good. That's what we're going for. Yeah. Well, that's wonderful. Did you have difficulty keeping your attention focused on the breath? You did do that, huh? Where was your mind going? Well, maybe you shouldn't say. Maybe you don't want to share that information with us. One of the more advanced practices that we have is that, once you become accustomed to watching the mind, is you can begin to observe the kinds of thoughts that you have. And this is very helpful because some people think a lot in the future. Some people think a lot in the past, or their mind keeps coming back to certain, what I call channels. It's like the mind is a TV, and you've got a limited number of channels, and my mind tends to play a lot of the same things. I don't know what your life is like. My life is like a movie, and I'm the hero. And so when I meditate, that movie starts playing. And, there are people in the movie come and go. You guys are like the extras and everything. And I'm the hero. And, I'm imagining various scenarios and things like that. That's one kind of thing. But then sometimes I start getting into this loop that's really very troubling. It's the I'm a jerk loop. It's, oh, God. I'm such a bad person. Or, how could I do this? Or, here I am wasting these good people's time teaching them this pointless exercise, or whatever it might be. It's whatever we tell ourselves is really who we become. The Buddha said, that our experience is shaped by our minds. In the end, we ultimately become who we think we are. And so, if we begin thinking these negative thoughts, then eventually that's the way our lives become. And so being able to discern those and see when we're having what the Buddha called unwholesome thoughts is a very, very useful thing, so that we can gradually, gently begin to retrain the mind. You know, it's taken us, well, in the Buddhist tradition, it's taken us hundreds of thousands of lifetimes to get here. And so we have these ingrained habits. And basically what we're trying to do is to recondition the mind to think in more wholesome ways, in ways that are more liberating, that end our suffering. And part of the problem is we've just gotten into this habit of thinking these negative things about ourselves and about others. And trying to break that habit is a very difficult thing to do. It's got to take place, you know, over time and very gently. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, me too. The pain did.
Well, because I'm thinking about the air coming through my nostrils.
Yeah.
But then it gets back to that. I mean, so is sitting in a comfortable position not the best thing to do because you kind of want to? I mean,
Yeah. That's a really good question, because to some degree you do want to experience discomfort, because it helps you to work with pain, and you can really learn to manage your pain. And they teach a lot of this in medical schools now about how to manage pain using meditation, and there are certain techniques for that. So you don't want to get so comfortable that you fall asleep, you know. But on the other hand, if the pain is so great, it's going to distract from your meditation. So it's kind of a balance. And so if you find it difficult to meditate while you're sitting, you can stand if you want, if that's better, or even lie down. You can meditate in any posture. There's nothing sacrosanct about sitting. That just happens to be, you know, the tradition to do it that way. So sometimes I lay down. It's pretty good in the bed, you know, to do it that way. But again, tendency is to go to sleep, things. But that's good. So that's one way to deal with pain, is just to kind of distract yourself and think about something else. The other is to go into the pain and think about it and make that the object of meditation. And that's a little harder. Yes, sir.
If you were going to start practicing meditation, do you recommend getting into a routine, like a certain time of day and a certain place just dedicated to that?
I certainly do. I think that's the best thing. I tell folks that it's better to meditate for 5 minutes every day than it is to meditate for 30 minutes once a week. It is the repetition that's important, and it is the intentionality of doing this. And so the best thing to do is to try to do it at a particular time, to make it part of your routine, and to do it in a particular place. This is really one of the reasons why Buddhists light incense, for instance. It's there because that smell evokes that sense of serenity. So once you smell it, you know that calmness begins to pervade it, prepares you, primes you for the meditation. Same thing with the room, same thing doing it every day, so that you get into this routine and it doesn't become a struggle so much. I mean, to me, the hardest thing about meditation is struggling with myself to do it. But when I make it like brushing your teeth, you struggle with brushing teeth in the morning. Nobody really does it. They go through this agonizing thing. Should I brush my teeth or not? No, you don't do that. And so you want meditation to be the same way. You know, it's just, okay, I'm going to do this. This is it. No questions. Yeah.
In a Tai Chi class that I have been taking for several years, we start out standing in different poses.
Mm-hmm.
And you turn this way and this way. And, and each time it's about 4 or 5 minutes. And at the very beginning, I was really not able to stand that still.
Yeah.
And after several times, I was. And one thing I realized was that all these thoughts were coming into my mind. But in the gym, there's a hardwood floor. And if I would pick out a piece of hardwood and focus on it, that I was able to totally blank out everything.
Yeah.
And as thoughts came in, I would go back to that piece of wood, and I was able to meditate. Otherwise, I'd get nervous when I started thinking about the thoughts. Another thing that was very relaxing was to visualize a wheel of running water running up on the wall and the ceiling and coming down on
Defying gravity?
on my head. Yeah.
Okay.
And I would focus on that running water, and that helped me to relax.
That's great. Well, the practice with the hardwood floor is exactly what we're doing here, focused on one thing and then kind of bringing our attention back to that. And certainly to visualize certain things. Many people find that to be very helpful. They're very visual kind of individuals. And so one of the things that Tibetan Buddhism practices is try to focus on that image of the Buddha. And not only that, but to imagine that you are the Buddha. Bill used the phrase I liked to earlier this morning, fake it till you make it. Okay, so you don't feel like the Buddha, but pretend that you're the Buddha. Okay? Just pretend that act like the Buddha for a day. And that begins to help. And you see those qualities reflected in those images.
I told Bill about the piece of hardwood floor,
Yeah.
and he said, I wouldn't focus on it after I was
That's funny. Yes, sir.
talking about visualization and smell. What about sound?
Sound is another good thing. In fact, I have been in the last several years doing a lot of focus on sound, but it's the sound of silence. And so I try to find a very quiet place. And what I discovered is it's very difficult to find total silence. What I hear, and I used to hear this as a kid, and it would scare me, is you can actually begin to hear the sound of air molecules on your eardrum. And it can get very loud, and it can be very scary. Especially when you're a kid. But I use that now as a focus of attention, just allowing that sound to happen. So I think it's really good. And it's also good, did you hear the air conditioner come on? Yeah, all right. So, it's just try to be attentive to what's going on. And so, sometimes you might hear a siren going on. I think somebody was talking about the helicopters flying by earlier. That's okay. You're just observing that experience. You're trying not to get caught up into them. The problem is if you start hearing a helicopter and you say, I wonder what's going on there. I wonder if they're giving free helicopter rides today. And I remember my friend who took a helicopter in Hawaii. Yeah, and they were jumping from island to island. And boy, I sure wouldn't mind being at Waikiki these days. And that's kind of how it goes. So, but you say, helicopter. And then go back to your breathing. That's the kind of thing. So it's to kind of stop that train of thought in its track and just let it go. Yeah.
In yoga, we always do this.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something in Buddhism?
Yeah, it is. It's something in
To let
Buddhism.
the energy in, or
It's called a mudra in both Hinduism and Buddhism, and they mean different things. You can do them. And in Buddhism, basically what they mean are certain, well, it means this too in Hindu iconography, and that is certain things about, it's a certain message that's trying to be conveyed. Like this means fear not,
Right.
okay? And this means you're invited, and
Right.
something like that. This is just, as far as I know, in Hinduism, has no particular significance. It's just something that you find in a lot of the icons. you know.
okay, because some people I know do the index
They
finger
do
thumb,
that, huh? Okay.
or that. I
Okay.
have been seeing yoga teachers do both. I
Yeah.
don't know
Have
which
you ever
one.
asked them why they do it?
No.
Because somebody else did it, I guess. Yeah. So that's probably what. There's this interesting one in Christianity. Have you ever seen this one? Does anybody know what that means? Yeah. Well, it's actually a statement of Orthodox theology. You see this particularly on Eastern Orthodox icons, okay? And it means Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. It's a statement of Trinitarianism and the two natures of Christ, fully human and fully God, just like that. So it's a theological statement. So that's what it is. And similar sort of thing in these icons in Hinduism as well.
Seeing how different Christianity and the religions of the West are from the religions of the East, would you care to state what it was that made them so different?
You know, here's what I would say. They are different, but they're also very much the same. And it depends upon which parts of the tradition you're comparing. So there are these spiritual and mystical aspects in Christianity and in Islam and Judaism that are very similar to the mystical, spiritual aspects of Hinduism and Buddhism. In fact, I remember I was giving a talk to some group, and they got a little scandalized by this because I was saying, you know, I've been living in India. I went to a Hindu temple, and I found that the Hindus, in some practices, had more in common with the Southern Baptists than the Southern Baptists had with the Unitarians or the Episcopalians, because some of the practices were very much the same, kind of rigid, dogmatic structure, things like that. So it sort of depends upon what you're looking at. And then the Episcopalians were much closer to the Buddhist because of some of the practices that they were doing. So if you focus on belief, I think they're very different, yeah. But if you focus on practice, I think that's where the religions come together. I did a study of prayer a couple of years ago, and one of the things I discovered is that prayers are almost all the same, no matter where you go. People pray for the same thing. They just pray to different gods. But it's pretty much the same thing. They do it pretty much in the same sort of way, you know, with a gesture of humility. And they ask for a lot of the same sort of things. So, you know, in that sense, they're very close. But they are different. And what I attribute that to is, gosh, just the variety of the different ways that humans have to interpret the world. I think the world is just a multifarious reality that can be seen in so many different ways, and these different ways can be legitimate. I think that there is so much truth in all sorts of different traditions and so much falsehood in them as well. And we can have different sorts of experiences of the very same thing, just like that picture of the rabbit and the duck that I was showing. We're looking at the same thing, but we all perceive it somewhat differently. So, and people tend to believe the things that work for them, essentially. So over time, these traditions develop because they work. Yeah.
One of the things I have learned about this evening, about the difference between meditation in the modern age and the meditation in the ancient age, is that it's much more difficult to meditate now when your phone is ringing in your pocket.
What you need to do is make your phone an aid to your meditation. Now, I don't know how to do this because I don't know if you've noticed, I've been pulling out my phone every now and then. Have you seen my phone? It is not a smartphone. Okay, and thank you. That's because I'm an addict. And if I ever had, hey, you got one too, great. If I ever had one of those phones, it would cause me such great distraction. So I know that there are applications that you get, and I actually bought a little timer that did this for me several years ago to go off randomly at certain times during the day. And it would vibrate, wouldn't make a noise. I have it in my pocket, and just sort of at any given hour, I probably had it set for like maybe 10 different times during the day, I'd feel this vibration, and I would stop. Take a deep breath. Think, where am I? What am I doing? Am I doing what's really important right now? I call it coming to my senses. You know, I stop and I come to my senses and just do that. And now I don't do it because I rely on other kinds of cues to do that. Like when the telephone rings, I stop. I take a deep breath. I come to my senses. We have a bell on campus that rings every half hour. I do the same thing then. As I drive into my house tonight, I will stop as I turn off the car, take a deep breath, and reflect on what it is that I'm doing. So it has become kind of habitual for me. And I think that actually the phone could be an aid for that. And if I had one of those smartphones, I wouldn't have needed one of those bells that I forgot because I could make it ding. My wife has that, so that's one thing. But you're right. For me, it's a real distraction. Other people I know can handle it. I'm just not very good at it.
Do you prescribe silence for the point of meditation that one of the gentlemen asked about sound?
Yeah.
The sound of your voice, as soothing as it is, and the slight direction you were giving us through it was very helpful to me, and it enabled me anyways to keep focus and to realize a sense of calm. Is there music that assists you with that, or is there something we can do at home?
You can buy my videotapes. Download them from audible.com.
Really?
Help my daughter
On
get
my-
through college.
On my smartphone. On my
That's what I
smartphone.
highly recommend.
I will do that on my smartphone.
There are all kinds of places on YouTube, guided meditations, all kinds of stuff. Some of them are really good. I have just never gravitated towards that. I'm kind of a minimalist, and I like the silence, and I like being still and quiet, and to me that is the most calming thing. I love music, but I don't like to try to meditate while I'm doing music because I get so absorbed in the music. I kind of lose my awareness of what I'm doing. So when I'm listening to music, I like to listen to music. But when I'm meditating, I like to meditate. But if you find the guided meditations helpful, and I know a lot of people do, YouTube, and there's some applications where you can do this. Oprah and Deepak Chopra have one, and gosh, you all must know some of these places because I don't have a cell phone, a smartphone, so I don't know what they are, but they're there. Yeah. But audible.com, I'm there. Yeah. I can actually hear you pretty well. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh.
Excuse me. It doesn't get recorded.
Okay. It doesn't get recorded.
Hi, I'm Constance, and I want to thank you again for the breathing, because every time I started feeling the pain, I would go back to my breathing, and it helped, as that lady over there said. But I did want to go backtrack a little bit when we were talking to various religions and how similar they were. Mm-hmm. I was brought up a Christian Scientist, and that was founded by Mary Baker Eddy back in the 19th century. And it was quite a religion, and they didn't believe in doctors, so I didn't see a doctor for all my childhood. But one of the things that I do remember, when you go to church on Sunday, there is always a quiet, silent prayer before the actual reading from the Bible and the Key to the Scriptures, which is the book that she wrote. And one of my most favorite things was, man is not material. He is spiritual.
Mm-hmm.
I thought you'd like that.
Yeah.
And I love your phone.
Thank you. The Quakers are like this too. Their meetings are just silence unless somebody feels moved by the Spirit to stand up and speak. And I like that. I think that's why sometimes I have a hard time going to church, is sort of listening to some guy talk to me. And being a theologian, I'm just constantly dissecting it and criticizing it, and it drives me crazy. So I'm just much better off being alone and not listening to someone. Yeah. That's you.
I'm waiting for the
Oh, you want the microphone, huh? No, I didn't. Exactly.
This is just, since early this morning, this has been striking me. You know, the images you showed as you were speaking of the mythology of the Buddha, he had a halo.
Oh, I forgot to mention that. Yeah.
As did all the holy cards when I was getting raised.
Yeah.
And the other thing that struck me is the women were almost shown as being sensual. Whereas
Very good.
in Christian, you know, our holy cards, when we were little, they were anything
but. I'm so glad you
it's
saw
just
that.
interesting. I mean, did that happen?
Well, I didn't
parallel,
want
or
to
is there
comment on
copy?
the sensuality of the pictures because I didn't want you to think I had my mind in the gutter. But that's exactly what they always struck me. I mean, there's that picture of, you know, Mahamaya, you know, having a dream of the white elephant and her breasts are exposed. And I mean, it's just, and it seems to me like, God, do you really want to give this out to your Sunday school class? And that's what it's for. You know, that was Sunday school literature. And it always struck me as being very sensual. But I think the part of it is to try to accentuate the allure of the world, you know, and how dangerous those kinds of pleasures are. So that's there. And so that's true. And then the other thing was the nimbus, we would call it a halo, is almost ubiquitous throughout the world. You find it, of course, in Christian iconography, but also in Muslim iconography. There are images of Muhammad and other individuals who have a fire over their head. And the same is true in certain Hindu iconography as well. So it's a very common thing, and all it suggests is, I guess to use the Christian term, redemption. If you look in Christian iconography, the pictures of Jesus have this halo or a glow about them, and if it's someone like Judas or Pontius Pilate, they don't have that. But if it's one of the apostles, they do. Yeah. So it's an indication of their spiritual interiority more than anything else. And I don't know if you noticed it, but the Buddha didn't get that halo until after he was awakened. When he was a prince, didn't have it. Yeah.
I'm informed we got time for one more question before Delta starts to leave here.
Oh, gosh.
I noticed that one of the Buddhas had a swastika on, and I wonder if you knew whether the Nazis intentionally adopted that or whether there was a common source.
That's a good question. I'm so glad you asked that, and the answer is yes. That symbol is ancient. It's an ancient Indian symbol that's probably at least 4,000 years old. It's a symbol of the sun, and it comes in a variety of forms. Adolf Hitler was aware of some of the scholarship that was being done. The Germans were the first ones to do Western scholarship on India. And they discovered that. They uncovered this theory of Aryan superiority that I was telling you about, and they adopted this Aryan symbol. And Hitler actually spent a lot of time looking through that information, that scholarship, before he decided on that particular swastika. Yeah. And swastika is a Sanskrit word. It means swastika is how it's pronounced. It means a good marking. It's a good marking. Some people wear it on their heads, their foreheads, and things like Charlie Manson. I remember going to a shop with a German friend of mine in India, and we were buying what are called lungis, these skirts that the men wear. And the guy was bringing out all these things for us to look at, and he brought out one bolt of this fabric, and it was all just covered with swastikas. And you can imagine my German friends' abhorrence at this sort of, no, there's no way.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Ron.